Hi everybody, and welcome to the SAP Press Book Club. And today's book, well, first of all, I'm Kendall Tyler. I'm your host, and today's book is actually brand new, coming out today. So, actually, what did they call it? They call it it's being dropped or whatever, or press. So anyway, it's SAP DRC, Document and Reporting Compliance, and so it's a brand new book just out. So I have the pleasure of having the authors here with us. And so I would love to welcome them, and let's do a quick intro and find out who they are. So why don't we start it off with Jen?
Thanks, Kendall. Hi, everyone. Good day, because I believe we're across multiple different time zones. So I'm Genevieve in full, Jen for short. I am a partner in Deloitte's tax technology consulting team, and one of the authors alongside, we had a fantastic team beside us, but also I will allow Eliza and Iain to introduce themselves as well. Eliza, maybe?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Eliza Alberts-Muller. I'm a partner in Deloitte Tax Technology Consulting, like Jen and Iain. Really happy to be here, and looking forward to all your questions.
Yeah. Last but least, I'm Iain MacIntosh. So I'm a principal, and I head up our US Tax Technology Consulting group. So it's nice to be with you all today.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. And are you pretty psyched about the book? I mean, it's this day one release. And so I was wondering, did you guys get a copy?
Good,
they got
yes.
their copies. That's wonderful. Excellent, excellent. So I know I'm thrilled. This is a topic that we really didn't think about. And then all of a sudden there's so much like conversations going on around this. And so we're pretty excited about this. And so what I really would love to know is that, DRC is a mystery box full of surprises. So, what should we be aware of?
So there's, I think, a couple of answers to that question, in all honesty, Kendall. I think maybe before going into DRC, I think it's more, what is it trying to solve, right? And I think the most important thing in there is that a lot of countries are issuing mandates, digital mandates, to make sure that they can keep track of all the transactions that are happening within their jurisdictions. So they will all use different types of mandates. There's approximately 6 different varieties, which you will find in the book as well. And just imagine 6 different types of mandates across, let's say, 195 countries in the world. Gets us in, there are some people that are very quick in math. I'm not, but it's around 1170 different varieties of e-invoicing implementations that you can have. So then we have DRC being a solution that can adapt to everything, but there's still some work to be done, and that's why I think it's also a mystery box.
Wow. So the more countries you've got, the more things different ways of doing it. Everything's different, every country.
Yeah. But also, Kendall, I think the fact that it's not only VAT or GST, it is also withholding tax. It can be maybe even other direct taxes, environmental taxes. There's a whole slipstream that actually tax authorities want us to report digitally.
Is this plug and play or more nuisance? How does this affect like timelines?
Well, I mean, it's definitely nuanced because, last count, I think, was 500 and something different reports and obligations that DRC handles. So it largely depends on what it is and what countries are in scope, but it's definitely nuanced. And, depending on what it is you're putting in, there's a different set of activities that have to go in. Sometimes it's installing OSS notes followed by configuration. Other times it's more of a mapping exercise that takes more of the design considerations. So it's definitely nuanced depending on what it is that you want to roll out, because it does offer a wide array of different things. And it also has to integrate with a lot of the other work streams. So whether it be order to cash or procure to pay. So there's a lot of back and forth on how you're going to design the system. So it's definitely not plug and play, but once it's in, it's got the scalability really to deal with SAP clients as they move into new countries and new mandates are added.
So like, what is the best way to find out like issues before you're too late in the process? I mean,
I think that's actually a really good question. So I think maybe to start off with is that you really need to understand what are you facing, right? Well, how many countries? What is your journey? Where are you now? Where will you be going? And what is the interim state? And how are you going to manage that? So I think some of those are, for me, are fundamental. So know what your plan for what you want to do. And I think some of the other things in that is that start on time. Also with the how to put the systems in place and at what point in time do you put it in place. So a lot of countries require maybe some specific software towards to oblige with the country legislation, right? Sometimes we refer to that as last mile connectivity. If you only start with that, like when your implementation and when all the design already has happened and you go into your quality environment, then you're too late, because some countries want to maybe approve of what you have installed and how you've installed it, and you need to put all the integration points in place. So I think start on time, take it serious. I think that is something that is really important to make sure you don't find issues at a very late stage in the game.
One thing that everybody's talking about is getting from, ECC, getting them over to S4, S4 on-prem, getting them over to cloud, private, public, and, everybody's doing different approaches on how they're doing this. Some are brownfields, flips going over it. Some are doing greenfield implementations. So with this, what do you see as like the different approaches of how do you redesign existing solutions, versus like, just doing a brownfield solution? What are the pros and cons of each one of these different approaches?
I think that's a really great question, Kendall. And I think if I take a particular client I'm working on at the moment, they first did their business case for their S4 implementation actually back in late 2022. And at that time, there was only 9 of their countries, so there was way more countries that had something, but 9 of their countries had something. And at that moment in time, they decided that it wasn't maybe a massive priority to do a full-scale transformation around digital reporting, because it wasn't the biggest priority at that moment in time. And that's absolutely fine, right? You have to, when you're doing, and sorry, their backdrop, but they're doing a selective transformation. So it's not brownfield, it's not full greenfield, it's nicknamed bluefield in the industry, somewhere in between. So they had to prioritize and they had to look at scope, budgets, timelines. Life then evolved a little bit, and actually their whole S4 got shifted to the right, and they are now not going live until 2027. So what's happened between 2022 and 2027 is that 9 countries has evolved to about 22 of their countries. And all of a sudden they're looking into, actually, do you know what? Keeping what we currently have is probably not that conducive to supporting the business case moving forwards. But equally, they've got to manage that alongside other delivery risks, around, again, timeline, budget. So they've actually ended up with a hybrid approach. So they are going to pilot DRC for their net new countries. So that's the new countries like France and Belgium and Germany. And when Poland finally gets there and actually finishes their requirements, they will do that for net new. And then they're going to try and remediate their existing, where they are using EDICOM at the moment. And the interesting thing with that situation is I actually think the IT team believes remediating the existing solutions is fairly straightforward. Bless you, Iain. But I actually think that it's not straightforward. And, I think there can sometimes be a misconception that actually keeping what you currently have is less delivery risk. I personally don't necessarily think that is the case, but would welcome Iain and Eliza's view on that as well. And the only other thing I would say is for many, there's the current situation, as in you've got business as usual. So also, alongside looking at 2027, they're already having to design for S4, they're already having to think about the future. But France is going live slap bang in the middle of 2026, and therefore they've got to also do something against ECC. So it's a massive moving feat. They've got to do stuff into existing solutions alongside looking to the future. But I don't know, maybe Iain, Eliza, you want to also share your thoughts around approaches to deployment?
Well, maybe echoing Jen, what you were just explaining, because what I see at one of my recent clients is where we're doing a remediate, is that it is not easy. And it's just technically we do lift and shift, we take the code, but then if you have S4 and you have new table structures, you have new setup, you have new business processes, so it's not find and replace and the problem is solved. So what we see with remediate, actually those type of situations get earlier on the critical path than if you would just do a net new implementation, where you actually sit together with the businesses, look where you have the hooks, and actually can make sure that the right data is being selected and therefore help the client to be ready for the future. I don't know, Iain, if that's also something that you come across with your clients.
Well, I know in the US, as people move from ECC to S4, we're seeing a lot more what they call like brownfield plus or selective transformation, which, from an IT standpoint or CIO standpoint means it's lift and shift as much as possible, unless there's new functionality or reasons in business cases for big rocks, et cetera, that you need to make and add, new modules or whatever. The fortunate thing about DRC in that is, in fact, it is exactly what that brownfield plus intended to do. So new module, right? I mean, I know that there was eDocs and, previous things for ECC, but fundamentally in its current state, DRC as a conjoined statutory reporting and e-invoicing real-time reporting solution is in essence a new-ish module, right? And so it does fit into the brownfield plus, and with the fact that the legal mandates are coming out, the justification to add it to a brownfield, I think, is pretty well trodden now, especially what I'm seeing with my clients in the US. So what we are seeing, though, is a lot of clients as well that have, especially when it comes to e-invoicing, have legacy solutions, which tended to be point-to-point solutions. So people put them in as countries put them in, as far back as Brazil in 2008, right, with Nota Fiscal. People were putting in local solutions, and that is just built and built and built. And when you're moving to an S4 system, that's your opportunity to consolidate on a single provider, right? Depending on your framework and your IT landscape. And I often highly recommend DRC in those situations where it fits into the landscape. So,
well, good, Iain. So I have some questions for you from the audience. So here we go. Let's see if we can handle these. While we're talking about US, so here's one question. Within SAP DRC for the United States, once the withholding tax reports and forms are generated, is there a standard capability to automatically distribute these forms to the relevant business partners? Specifically, can the system send the generated PDF forms directly to vendors or customers without requiring users to download and manually email each form individually?
As of now, no. The one thing I would say about that, though, I think that is something that we've got on our list of things that we're trying to get those capabilities added. So in discussions with SAP to get that added. As of right now, it is manual email. The one thing I would say we're finding as well, though, is you may be overassuming how accurate your master data is. So often what we find, when people have capabilities, or they're using a solution that does have those capabilities, you're getting a lot of things rejected because they're actually wrong, and you end up cleaning up your master data. So whilst I would love that functionality to be perfect and the master data to be perfect to support it, as of right now, that isn't the case, but it's something that we're trying to get added.
There you go. Here's another question from the audience. Is DRC part of standard license of S4, or it requires an extra license?
It requires extra licenses, everyone. So there is some basic functionality as standard, but that's very, very basic. And then there's different tiers to the license structure, but you need to get it added to your bill of materials. And you should expect that there is slightly different pricing, particularly between the e-document part and the periodic filings. So it is a consideration. It's quite hard to answer much more specifically than that, because everyone on this call will know that the way SAP licenses and the exact structure can vary, and it's down to negotiation tactics. But yes, you will need to expect to have it in your bill of materials, and there will be additional licenses that you need to consider.
Yep, lots of add-ins within the bill of material, I found. So here's another question from the audience. So is SAP BTP required for DRC, specifically for e-documents? What if the DRC solution is needed for an enterprise with only a few messages, less than like 10,000 a year, which do not justify the BTP cost? So what are the options to integrate?
Wow, that's a very specific question. I think it's short to answer. Yes, so SAP is expecting BTP to be used, particularly because you have to remember when we say integrate, remember e-invoicing is not just a PDF. E-invoicing is an actual message that goes through to the tax authority, and you've got to have a mode and method to do that, irrespective of volumes. So yes, unfortunately, one of the things perhaps we should have said up front is it really doesn't matter in a country whether you have 10 invoices or you have 10,000 invoices or you have 1 million invoices. The level of compliance that you've got to achieve is often the same. And that's the thing I think a lot of IT functions also misjudge, is when you look at then the implementation cost. Yes, sorry, unfortunately, in certain countries, for the size of your business in that country, you may find you spend a disproportionate amount to get that country live, but it's about protecting your license to operate. And I think, Eliza, just before everyone joined this call, we were talking with Kendall about the fact these are often, they're not optional, they're mandatory, and therefore, honestly, it doesn't matter how many you've got to comply. So yeah, unfortunately, whether you have 10,000 a year or you have one a year or you have 1 million, I guess if you only have one a year, maybe just don't do business in that country. But sometimes that's a little hard.
The invoice is, though, right? It really depends. If it's a very, very, very big invoice, you may want to do it.
It could be one very big invoice. Yeah, true, Eliza.
Yeah. So one of the other questions is, what are the main challenges in the DRC implementation, and how do you tackle them?
One of the big ones we see coming up. Yeah, sorry, Eliza. I guess one of the big ones I wanted to mention up front is around connectivity to the tax authorities, because you've got to have a mechanism to be able to do that sort of end-to-end testing. But I know, Eliza, you've got plenty of things at the moment, because I think you're going through some pretty complex countries at the moment, right?
Yes, very true. But maybe even so I think I really like the way you approached the question, because you went straight into the connectivity and towards the countries, where I actually was looking more towards the business. So what you see as from what I see is one of the biggest challenges is the fact that within organizations there's not always a clear owner of e-invoicing. So who is actually owning the e-invoicing process? Is it order to cash? Is it procure to pay? Is it tax? Is it finance? And then, it's like a hot potato. So sometimes it's somewhere in a shared service center, and the head of tax thinks like, ooh, I don't want to burn my hands maybe on this one, because, this is systems and that's not my cup of tea. And order to cash thinks, yeah, it's fine, I'll arrange it for order to cash, but these tax authorities, that's not my cup of tea. And you see that I think fixing that and really looking into, okay, where is that ownership? Do we have executive sponsorship in place? And making sure that if tax is the owner, which in my view, I think is the right owner, and I'll just, if you allow me 2 minutes to explain why, is that ultimately the tax authorities will stand in front of the head of tax or the CFO and say, you have not done your business right. So, and that's why you can go to jail or whatever the fines are, or pay, or etc. Therefore, I think the vested interest tax has to make sure that these processes are done in the right way and complying with all the legislation, for me, therefore, drives the ownership towards tax. But it doesn't mean that the others don't have to do anything, and it's not an integrated approach. So for me, it's a business transformation owned by tax, but heavily like business integration, so with procure to pay, with order to cash, with record to report for all the intercompany transactions, really to bring it together. And I think for me, that would be my, yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges. I don't know, Iain, if you have anything to add from your experience.
I see a lot of questions coming in about the US. I was going to actually.
I know, isn't this funny? I love this. Iain, Iain's on the hot seat here.
Yeah, I see a lot. I actually spent a lot of my career was actually in Europe. I'm actually from Ireland originally, but I'm based out of Chicago now. So, Jen and I used to work with each other in London a long time ago. So small world, right? Anyway, on the US side of things, yeah. So there's a question on, there's two questions here that I don't mind taking. So one, do you expect the DRC ebook will lead to SAP certification, like a training track? That's in discussions, right? That request has actually been made. So more to come out, I guess, on that. I know that quite a few people have been asking about that. So that's something that we're considering working with SAP on. So we'll provide more updates as that comes out. In the context of DRC for the US, so sales and use tax returns specifically. As of obviously right now, DRC does not cover sales and use tax returns, although it does cover Canadian indirect tax returns, right? GST, HST, etc. So there is, however, a couple third-party tools which have the forms and the content for sales and use tax returns in the US that do connect through DRC, so that you're able to utilize the functionality within DRC, for the workflows and the process management of it. But at the same time, you're connecting at the back basically to these sales and use tax returns that have the content. So it does require an additional license, but if it's a demonstration that somebody would like, you can reach out, we can connect you. But there is two third parties that do have a tool that does connect through the DRC cockpit for that.
What are those? Do you remember?
Thomson Reuters specifically, right? That's one that we've dealt with a lot, and there's another one, I think it's CCH that has it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Excellent. And that's so another question. Let's see if I can jump in and get this one in here. Okay, so we've got people who are waiting for the book, who have gotten the ebook today, which is pretty cool. Let's see, we have one for, here we go, from Simon. Hi all, this book is perfect timing for me. Waiting for my pre-order to turn up. It'll be there, Simon, don't worry. And question for inbound, is it Pepperell e-invoicing? Is that what?
Pepple.
What is it?
Pepple. It's a business.
Pepple. How comprehensive are the business rule validations in the DRC framework for supporting countries? Do they have to be typically be extended to meet all of the EN 16931 business rules?
Wow, that's a very specific question, Simon.
Yeah, that's good. Even down to the EN 16931.
I think it comes, so a couple of things. One thing I would say is you have to remember all solutions from a digital reporting mandates perspective continue to evolve, right? I joked earlier about Poland, right? I think Poland's been in the train of implementing something for some time now. And I was actually chatting with a client in a session on Tuesday about their slight irritation that they'd got themselves ready and then the delay happened again. So I think the honest situation, everyone, is this continues to be an evolving situation. So DRC supports many different formats, and where it doesn't necessarily directly support a format, it has the mechanism to support a format. So in the book, we cover around the more standard aspects of DRC and the framework it creates for you, but it also covers around the extensibility. So even if it's not part of standard, you have the building blocks. So the one nice thing that SAP have given you in DRC is the building blocks to then be able to do more, because I think the one certainty in the level of uncertainties that exist in this world we can give you is often you are finding you are having to do more than the SAP standard or the standards that SAP give you. Now that could be driven by business requirement, it could be driven by industry standard, because you have to remember SAP and no provider is going to give you everything for every single industry. It's just not possible. So it's interesting. We've just done one recently for part of a business that was in the shipping world, and you have all sorts of weird and wonderful things in the shipping world, around extra taxes that don't even exist in any other industry, and some of those were currently listed on the invoice manually currently in the PDF. You try adding something into an electronic invoice, you can't do that manually anymore. So you have to evolve your business process, you have to make changes, you have to enable something to happen, to support that. So it's a really hard specific question to answer, but yeah, in short, there is the framework to support with many different standards.
And I think it should be in chapter 4. So
yes.
I was thinking about that tax, you just don't think about like tax for one thing. Even when you go to a hotel, they have different taxes, different, like if you're in a hotel in Vegas versus a hotel in Alabama, all of a sudden you have all these extra taxes in there. So everything's different, industry different, countries are different. It's very confusing. So we have a question here. He said he just received the ebook today and he's reading it. Question for him is, he's an FICO consultant with SAP tax experience. He's now in a global rollout project in charge of tax and DRC, but actually limited knowledge of DRC. So in this case, do you have any tips for him to read the book more effectively? Like, are there any chapters or sections that he needs to pay attention to? Oh, look, we got the book here.
If you go into your preface, whoever asked that question, if you go into your preface, I think it should be about page 18. You will see we gave you a whole reading guide on how to read the book and which chapter covers what, and who might be interested in reading which chapter. So great question. We did think ahead, and there is some guidance in the book.
That is great. Perfect. Oh my gosh. Okay, so you guys are the first ones who have ever done that in a book, by the way. Other authors need to take that tip.
Well, maybe it takes just
we were just like super
one.
practical, and we were going, oh my God, certain chapters are just so difficult to read for certain people, right? So...
I know. You think everybody would just be like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. But no, if you're doing like FICO and you get put into a project and you're in charge of it and you're like, oh my gosh. So let's see, here's another question. Are there any tools to migrate to DRC from third-party tools, or should it be like a greenfield implementation?
To my knowledge, I've not come across a tool. Maybe somebody should set up a business in this space. But I think it will be a fresh implementation into DRC. And also, I guess my one reflection on that question is, I'm not really sure you'd want to replicate something from your existing setup in honesty, because you're probably finding that in order to respond to that requirement, things weren't perfect to start off with. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be looking to implement DRC. You'd probably be keeping your old solution if it was working so perfectly. So it's a great question. The honest answer is I haven't seen anything. I don't know, Iain, Eliza, if you've seen anything.
No.
They're writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone needs to create it. There you go. Business idea for somebody on this call. Create something.
Too funny. Here's another good one. So what is the direction of SAP for on-prem? Will they keep updating localizations aligned and existing tax and statutory reporting and compliances in different countries?
So it depends what on-prem we're talking about. Are we talking about ECC on-prem, or are you talking about on-prem?
Let's say ECC, no, but maybe S4 on-prem.
I mean, S4 on-prem, right? I mean, obviously there's a difference between the public cloud and on-prem S4, and then obviously there's RISE and things. But I mean, SAP, there's actually a good link in SAP that talks about regulations and the updates that go into SAP regarded to different country regulations and legal requirements and mandates. So that's a link that we can provide. It's a fairly good link.
Also it's in chapter 10, everyone. So when
Chapter
you get
10.
your book, when you bought your book and you're reading your book, look in chapter 10.
Yeah, I mean,
it does give you everything.
But I mean, SAP is, when it comes to DRC, the one great thing I like about DRC, other than it covers both periodic, statutory, and e-invoicing real-time reporting from one module, which is unique in the market. The fact that it provides the content and the content updates to those forms and reports, it is a strength, right? As far as like other localization mandates, I mean, that's works and the building blocks for some of that. That's my experience, but generally speaking, it's not going to be just cut and paste, right? There's design and configuration that needs to go in, and there's interpretation of those legal statutory tax mandates in those countries and how those apply and how they might apply to the specific way you've set your system up. Right?
I was going to say, here's another question exactly around that particular topic, which is it possible to extend the DRC capabilities to countries that don't even have a standard tax procedure, like creating docs for, what is it, Uruguay or Ecuador? I'm sure there are other countries too. But.
Yeah, I mean, tax procedure is one thing, but for the tax codes, I mean, it covers most countries, or you can create those and copy those. But yeah, you can extend the DRC framework to create additional custom reports or e-invoicing. You have that ability to do that. In addition to that, in the SAP marketplace, there is a number of different partners, I suppose, that will sell these pre-built products as one-off costs within the SAP marketplace that clients can buy, and those would fit into the DRC framework, but they are custom builds, so they are third-party products, so to speak, and we often implement those when there's certain gaps in countries for our clients that aren't covered by standard DRC. The alternative is you build them custom, but candidly, the price point for a lot of these is actually really good. So we tend to take the ones off the shelf and just implement those because they work into the cockpit of DRC. And that's the important thing. So it all looks standard SAP.
So another question is how many countries are currently supported by DRC?
By 500, right, Ian? Well, you just mentioned it, I think, at the beginning.
I don't know about the number of countries. I can tell you because there's a nice link at SAP constantly, and it's constantly changing. So, yeah, I think
it's on the website
as well.
Wow.
So we can say that.
So we have another question
but
here.
also we shouldn't mistake though, and I think it is one thing just to also everyone to be aware of is when you look at your end-to-end implementation, in certain countries you may still have that final mile connectivity mentioned in the book. I think as Eliza, you mentioned earlier, chapter 4, but I think people need to realize in certain countries, and this is outside of SAP's control, so it's not that SAP's not covering something and it's a gap, but in certain countries you have to have a legal entity to be a registered provider. And there are certain countries where obviously software providers don't have the ability to meet that mandate to be a local provider, and therefore you should and expect to have that you might have like a local third party that needs to be in that final mile connectivity with DRC. But it's the same with other providers, but it's just something to watch out for. I think if you look on the list from SAP, which is referenced in the book, but if you search for the DRC, country coverage, then you will see, and it has a little asterisk. And if you look at the little asterisk, then there's a little note at the bottom of the asterisk that says you may need a third party solution to do that final mile connectivity.
Wow. So here's another good one. Currently, they're implementing DRC in ECC, No, they implemented DRC and ECC, but they're doing an S4 migration, and they want to know what are the challenges they're going to be facing.
It depends how much change you're making in your move between
Indeed.
ECC and S4. So that's quite a quite a how long's a piece of string type question. If you're changing your tax codes, which quite often, companies want to do that, they want to dust off and remove some of the kind of tax code catalog that's maybe redundant and no longer used and everything, then you should be prepared that obviously if you've change things like tax codes or tax procedures, then you're going to need a level of reconsideration towards the mapping that you've managed and maintained in DRC. So again, as I very rarely see any true lift and shift for tax. There's always going to be a level of remediation. Maybe it's not a full reimagine, but you can certainly expect to remediate. And what's interesting, I know we covered it earlier, Kendall, in one of the first questions around can you really plug and play? Which the answer is no, definitely not for tax. But also, secondly, when you say lift and shift, there really is never a proper lift and shift for tax because things will evolve. There are data changes between ECC and S4. And just generally what we find a lot of is there's a hell of a lot of customization in most ECC environments. And when that's moved across, what you tend to find is there's been a lot of hard coding, and you tend to find that people will have taken shortcuts in the past and they'll have hard coded a tax code into one of their enhancements, and then that tax code has changed, and then you've got to go in and check because obviously you'll get a fail if you've got that within your code. And we're finding it's there's more there than people expect. So yeah. I don't think there is really a lift and shift.
I mean, why would you take over stuff that's redundant? I mean, even basic tax codes, as Jen's saying, you don't delete tax codes in SAP, but if you're going to shift, right, because of the linking between documents, but, at a point in which they're no longer in the statutory limitations or there's no tie to any open documents, at those points, you're never going to copy that stuff across, even in a lift and shift. That's your opportunity to clean it up and start from a cleaner plate, right, when you move to cloud. Because when it gets into cloud and you shift it across, you're not stuck with that. Because there's not going to be massive upgrades once you're in cloud. It's going to be continuous upgrades. So
yeah, definitely. Here's
and
another
it's really interesting. Just wanted to raise on that though, because I think it's a fascinating point, but it's linked. I saw there was an earlier question on around some of the basic settings causing challenges in the e-invoice, but your determination. So one of the key things coming out of a lot of e-invoicing is you've got to improve the determination. You cannot be correcting tax codes later. They have to be right first time. But also what's really fascinating when we talk about review your tax code catalog, I've had a real big debate recently because the amount of tax codes at the moment that don't have the granularity around zeros, and everyone goes, well, it's just zero. Well, no, actually, most tax authorities, they have a real distinction between different types of zero rating versus exempt versus just outside the scope. And whilst in the past, because a lot of stuff was done manually, it was done outside the system as part of your periodic filings, you could correct for that sort of thing and you could put it in. People didn't see a load of value in it because there wasn't potentially any VAT at stake. But the thing with e-invoicing and e-reporting is it's real time, it's automated. The chances are the data's gone across to the tax authority before anyone's able to spot anything. So actually zeros now matter because you're going to have to get it to the right box in the submission. You're going to have the right invoice messaging as part of the XML. So there's lots of different things to consider. But yeah, I think it would be fair to say your tax code catalog needs to be probably refreshed, and therefore I don't think there ever would be a lift and shift.
Yeah,
But I think it's even wider because your other data, like your vendor data, your customer data, as the tax authorities are receiving it and they're comparing everything with tax registration numbers or VAT registration numbers, like typos and stuff that will all pop up. So So it's not only about having the data is one thing, but also having the right governance and control around your data, and that with a tax lens, that drives actually that upstream transformation. So whereas, and this is of course the ultimate goal from the tax authorities, they want you to trade in the appropriate way and to make sure you have your act together the moment you engage with your customers and your vendors. And the e-invoice is a mechanism to actually push that upstream transformation, so that actually we can make sure that the tax is reported in the correct way and calculated in the correct way.
So when we talk about I'm sorry.
So I was just going to say one thing. A lot of companies that we speak to, right? That e-invoicing is another compliance requirement to them, but it is going to halt your business. It's going to bring it to a complete halt because it's not an option; it's a mandate, right? But it's also an opportunity, right? Because I think for the first time, probably since I've been around anyway, we actually have potentially the opportunity to have touchless AP, for example, right? So a full circle for indirect taxes, right, where everything's electronic, and that's a big deal because that drives efficiency within processes, right, as we move away from PDFs and things like that. So whilst it is daunting as more and more countries come on, it is also an opportunity for a business to drive efficiencies when you combine it with enhanced tax calculations and AP and things like that. So
we've seen it quite a lot now with our clients, right, where they can really see that value being generated because they're already halfway through the journey or they're already at the end of the journey. But as new countries come along, that they will have to continue to adapt.
Definitely. Now, when we're talking about integration, like we're talking about all this electronic stuff, and people are like, here's one question. In the case of the client is already using SAP Integration Suite to submit legal reports, such as an SII for Spain, do we need to license both SAP Integration Suite and DRC, or by continuing to use SAP Integration Suite, the DRC use and licensing won't be necessary since the electronic part's already covered?
I think the honest answer to that is a great question, but I think you need to actually ask SAP directly, because even if we wanted to answer that question, it depends exactly what agreement you've got with SAP and kind of how that's structured. As I said, the one thing you can often guarantee is it's not the same between every single organization. So I think it's a great question. Ask for that clarity from SAP and hopefully they can answer the question.
Because haven't you noticed that now the bill of material is literally almost like a pick? You get to pick different things and you kind of, so everybody's different at this point in what they're putting together. I mean, that's what I'm seeing as well. So here's another good one. So I'm an S/4HANA group reporting person. Ooh, there we go. And have an opportunity of working in the DRC S4 tax area. He literally never understood DRC, although he has 5 years of SAP DRC. Oh, he has what? Although, he's got some books on this.
So I read that question earlier, and I think this is around skill sets, right? And I think from a skill set perspective, it's really fascinating because obviously the one thing that is happening with all of these changes is there's more demand in the space. There's more need for people to have this knowledge. But when we say this knowledge, let's be clear, digital mandates sit in the heart of your core business processes. They sit in the heart of your sales process. They sit in the heart of your purchase process, your intercompany processes. And therefore, when we talk about what skill sets, it's a multidisciplinary team that you need. It's not just one person, right? So you need people that know and understand. And I think, Eliza, you answered this partly in your question earlier around who owns this implementation. And it, even if you have accountability sitting with tax or wherever it ends up sitting, it's going to require a whole collective of your organization across different work streams, across different functions. And yes, in honesty, if you've never done DRC before and you start to read chapter 4, you're going to think it's gobbledygook. right? That's just the honest truth. So don't start in chapter 4 because, that's not the best place to start. Start in chapter 3, which gives you an overview of it. But it is fair to say that I think if you don't have a strong foundational knowledge of the core SAP modules, then start with those and then pick up DRC, because DRC builds upon knowing how the sales process works, understand how you raise a sales order, into your billing document and your accounting postings. So if you're pure FICO, you're going to need to start to learn some of SD and MM, in honesty, to be able to really get to grips with DRC, because it's not, I think in the old world of tax, often tax was bucketed, well, if it was even remembered, quite frankly, right? But it was often bucketed into just the pillar with finance. It was seen as kind of like a once a month, I need to file a return, whoopity-doo. But actually, no, it sits in the heart of every single business process. They say there's 2 certainties in life, death and taxes. And you should expect taxes is sitting through every single thing that your organization is doing. And I think that's, back, also you asked the question at the beginning, Kendall, why is it, what was it, a box full of mystery surprises or whatever? Yeah. And it is genuinely because it draws upon so many different aspects and it brings it all together into one place. But yeah, you require lots of different skill sets. So probably in honesty, you're not going to be able to learn all of it by yourself. That's just the honest truth.
So we had one person ask, can you actually have a career as being an SAP DRC consultant?
Yes.
I would say yes.
Yes.
100%.
And I think it's a very lucrative career at this point in time. And I think it will not go away. So I think being a DRC consultant is definitely a good career move. But as Jen just mentioned, make sure you come prepared. So you have your SD, your MM, and your FI experience. That makes you
and
best
learn
placed.
Tax as well, everyone. Please learn tax, because it's really important to understand the different types of taxes. So yeah.
I love it. That's great.
So, I mean, we've talked about the system and what buttons to push, but you got to understand what the legal mandates are saying and the differences and of the different 5 types of e-invoicing models. What does that actually mean? So there's a specific specialization, I think, that you also have to understand the context of what it is you're putting, not just the buttons to push. And that is really the difficulty.
Yeah. Another thing here is one person asked, I think we covered this, but I'm not really sure, but I want to kind of hit it real quick. The challenges of having, if you don't have a plant abroad and you're doing reporting on, they sound the challenges around reporting currency and DRC reports if you don't have plants abroad for the functionality.
Yeah. Right. So if you don't have plants abroad and you have foreign VAT registration numbers, email me. you need to get plants abroad on. It does get more difficult. I mean, it depends. You must have had ECC for quite a long time. It's been around since 4.6C, I think. Even B, you could get it in if you had notes. But yeah, DRC is definitely working under the assumption that you have plants abroad activated in your system, which would then entail the country currencies and Forex for statutory exchange rates working, and the reporting country linked to tax codes and some of the processes associated. So you would want to have that active, which means there's a mini transformation to get that activated. But it's done it dozens of times. It's just it's step 1 in that, I would say.
What about archiving? Legal archiving compliance with regulatory requirements. Should the e-document archiving not be necessary since FI and SD documents are already archived in the SAP system?
So a bit of a loaded question, and we're not going to be able to go through all the archiving, but there is eDoc. There is an archiving framework, right, in the eDoc cockpit, okay? But even where you could use that as an example, generally speaking, you're going to have an SAP archiving strategy, and this is usually going to follow suit for it. So even if you're using like the eDoc archiving, like that won't work in a country like Italy because you have to use a local provider for archiving. So you're going to have to send the information. So archiving, one of the powers of DRC is it's close to the transactional data. it's not a boundary system. That's what makes it so strong. So when there's errors or there's things that need to be resolved, you're right in the system where the document was generated, right? Where the actual sales or the billing document or the invoice was generated. That's a powerful thing. But it also means when you're looking at archiving, you're not doing it in isolation. You're probably looking at how you're archiving everything.
Entire, yeah.
So here's another one. Someone wants to know, this is future things. I love future things. Do you foresee other countries may utilize the SAP SAS DRC model used for Brazil? We love Brazil. We've been talking about that earlier. Where SAP is responsible for e-invoicing updates.
Very difficult to predict what other countries are going to do, right? So when you think you know what's going to happen, then they change. So I find it's a good question, and I think sometimes we also ask ourselves that question. And unfortunately, I don't have my glass bowl to look it up. Maybe I don't know, Jen or Iain.
No, well, all I was going to answer at the heart of that question is back to the plug and play at the beginning. You have to remember this is never plug and play. So even if SAP is as part of their offering giving you, and this is the same for any vendor, by the way, it's not SAP specific, but even if they're going to say that they will allow the compliance with the actual framework for that particular reporting mandate, that's only the aspect in terms of the structure into the tax authority. You are 100% responsible for your own structure on your SAP and your ERP side. So there's a bit about, you have to remember this is built into data, it's built into processes, and therefore you actually need to make sure the whole thing is set up correctly, because that's what gives compliance. And honestly, I think what's fascinating is even the countries that have implemented these requirements, most of them don't stay static, right? You only have to look at Spanish SII, and I forget what version they're up to. Is it 13 or 14 or 15? Anyway, multiple versions, and every single version has potentially an additional data element that they start to add. So, I think you should expect it to continue to evolve. And even if SAP gave you the framework as part of that update, you then need to make sure that that's actually in the business data. Are you capturing that data point? Can you actually map it through? Even if you map it through, is it going to be populated? Because you'd be really fascinated the amount of challenges we've seen in the past where people think from an IT perspective, way, I've mapped such and such field from here to here. And then you actually look at the results and there's nothing being returned because that field was never populated with data. And that's the key thing. This is, you have to make sure everything flows through, and you can never fully, say that's not the business's responsibility. The business will always need to respond.
So another question here we have is, how does DRC solution handle synchronous integration with tax authorities, such as SII in Chile? Is it PACs in Mexico, SANAT in Peru? I think that's how I did it. And LATAM. Apparently everybody loves LATAM here, for document validation and stamping compared to reliance on legacy solutions like SAP PIPO.
Very detailed question.
They must be hanging out in Latin.
Yeah, somebody's going out in America for sure. Yeah, I would. I think it depends. We're talking about, like, specifically. I mean, you're talking about Mexico as well. Like, you're talking about the PACs in Mexico. Are we talking about the outbound side? Are we talking about the inbound side? So I would probably want to defer this one because it's quite a loaded question on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to join more than a book club to get the answer to that question, I'm afraid.
I love it. I love it. So let me ask you, we have more questions here. We will get those those answered, but I would love to know, what are the big 3 takeaways for everybody to know, from your experience? Like, what are the biggest learning takeaways that you have from a project?
I think don't underestimate, and it's hard because I say this as originally a full tax professional. Everyone talks about tax being complex, but I think you have to seriously not underestimate from an actual implementation perspective that things will continue to come out the woodwork right up until you go live, right? Because as I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest challenges is the connectivity all the way through.
Yeah.
So doing your full integration test, which encompasses not just the SAP side, but out into the tax authority and back, is often that cannot be tested until quite late in the process. And therefore you should expect and you should plan into your deployment strategy that actually you could be flying quite close to a decision of go, no go. And also, it's mentioned in the book, but many countries, particularly the LATAM ones that came through in that question, you have to have the right certifications in place to even be able to send a digital mandate through to the authority. And sometimes people miss that there are business process steps that have to be taken that have nothing to do with the solution, that you actually need to get registered, you need to go through a process. Some of those countries can take 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. So that needs to be planned into your timeline. Don't just think about it from an IT perspective, really get your tax team engaged, really understand what's required, and get prepped for that.
Excellent.
That would be my learnings. I don't know, Iain.
What about you
if you
guys?
wanted to add any extra ones? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have some that's more around a value case. Because of the impact, we've been speaking almost for I think an hour now, right? On okay, what do you have to think about? What do you have to consider? And it can maybe feel daunting because there are so many topics that we've touched upon. But I think Iain made earlier a really good point. It's around the opportunity, for instance, to go to touchless AP. But also there are other values also on the order to cash side, where you can get it actually can drive value, right? It can drive value also within your organizations, but also towards your customers. So for instance, sending out the correct invoice to your customer will reduce the number of escalations you get from a customer satisfactory perspective. So there are a lot of pros to it, and if you take that in consideration and don't only bring this as a compliance play, where I think most CEOs and CFOs, they don't want to spend their money on compliance plays, right? They want to see, okay, how can I be different in the market? Well, how can you be different in the market? At least to embrace this and make sure you can spend your money on other things that add more value to your organization than, for instance, handling customer escalations because your invoice was not correct.
I think it's fascinating how tax really does go just in the entire, from start to finish, of buying and purchasing and everything. I mean, it's, fascinating. So let's do one last question, and let's find something that's good. I loved the part about, well, here's my big thing I'd love to ask is, what's next? Disconnected. What is the newest thing that we should be looking forward to with SAP DRC?
Well, one thing that we're working on, or something that we're looking into, is really, how do we embed or adapt AI to drive efficiencies within DRC and just more legal and localization requirements more generally, right? So, we invest at Deloitte a lot of money in AI, both for our, in asset enabling our internal services for our clients to be able to drive things faster, quicker, more efficiently through a digital workforce, but also thinking about how we embed AI to make our customers' experience in these applications like DRC and SAP through SAP Joule more generally, right? I mean, Joule itself is definitely, it's definitely in the more foreground part of SAP right now, and it's something that we're looking to build out, jointly with SAP, some assets around DRC and how we benefit that solution in general. So
wouldn't it be amazing to just say
in the screens, but it's a work in progress for sure. But watch this space, especially how quickly.
I think it would be excellent if we could just say, like, hey, fix it. Just to go do all my taxes, and it just does it all automatically. That starts with data.
So
That's true.
without a data strategy, there's no AI strategy. So still got to set it.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys for coming here. I also want to say that, if you guys want to purchase the book, use Book Club 15 because I'll get you 15% off on this brand new book. And also, we really want to get them on the top 10 list. So everybody, let's purchase, let's get the ebook, and let's get them on top 10 and show them, everybody in the world, that DRC is a huge part of your project and what to expect currently, in the future, and in between the project from start to finish that we found. Basically, like, things change all the time, and we've got to keep up and make sure that we are doing what we're supposed to be doing. So thank you guys for coming to the SAP Press Book Club, and this is a wrap. So thanks again. And don't forget, let's get the book up, everybody. If you got it with you, make sure you buy it. Thank you. Bye, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you.